Giant squids are fascinating creatures. It's not surprising that for centuries they've appeared in myths, legends, and even religious texts. The most famous one is probably the kraken, a colossal squid-like monster that was said to attack ships and drag them down to the ocean floor. While stories about the kraken and other gigantic underwater monsters may be nothing but tall tales, scientists do know of a very real animal that may have been the inspiration for those stories. And this giant cephalopod has left behind no living relatives, no bones, and practically no trace at all. Hi, and welcome to my channel. Today, we're diving deep into one of the ocean's biggest mysteries. What happened to the giant squid? To learn more about the giant squid, it helps to first understand their close relatives, the Humboldt squid and the colossal squid. Humboldt squids can grow up to 20 feet long and weigh over 100 pounds, making them around 3 times larger than the largest squid species alive today. They live in the cold waters off the coast of South America and are known for their aggressive behavior. Fishermen sometimes find them congregated around their boats, ready to snatch up any bait or fish that get too close. When hooked, they fight hard, putting up such a struggle that fishermen call them the devil squid. Meanwhile, the colossal squid lives up to its name. It's estimated to be the largest invertebrate on Earth, with some specimens measuring up to 46 feet long. That's longer than a school bus. But don't expect to see one anytime soon. The colossal squid prefers the dark depths of the Southern Ocean, where it's rarely seen by human eyes. Both the colossal squid and the Humboldt squid are still with us, though scientists believe that both species evolved around 30 million years ago when there were other giant squids swimming in the seas. Fossil evidence suggests there were at least 10 different species of giant squid, including the 2 we know today. But unlike these modern relatives, all of the ancient giant squids were a lot bigger. What makes squids so huge? Well, according to National Geographic, size is linked to the amount of oxygen in the atmosphere. As an air-breathing species, humans need oxygen to survive. Since the beginning of the Cretaceous period, which began around 145 million years ago, oxygen levels have dropped significantly. But from the look of things, this hasn't affected our closest living relatives, the fruit fly, whose ancestors also made their debut during the Cretaceous. Scientists think they managed to increase their oxygen intake through increased breathing rates and larger body sizes. And it seems that giant squids did something similar. Their mantle, the main part of their body, grew significantly larger, giving them bigger muscles and brains. But why does this matter? Why should we care about the size of ancient squids? We're kind of obsessed with this question here at SciShow. Size matters because it can tell us how an animal functioned, lived, and interacted with its environment. Plus, knowing how organisms have changed over time can help us predict how they might change in the future. Unfortunately, ancient DNA doesn't usually survive, so the only direct evidence we have of giant squids comes from fossils. But fossils of soft-bodied animals like squids are rare. So to learn more about extinct giant squids, paleontologists often turn to something called the indirect fossil record. You're probably familiar with the usual suspects here, things like gastropod, which are the preserved shells of mollusks. But there are other more unusual kinds of fossils out there, including coprolites, which are fossilized poop. Studying coprolites may sound gross, but they can teach us a lot about what a creature is. And that's exactly what paleontologist Steve Weckler did when he turned his attention to giant squids. In 2019, Weckler published a paper on his investigation of coprolites found at 2 fossil sites in Peru. Using a scanning electron microscope, he analyzed the contents of the fossilized poop, which dated back between 130 and 145 million years. Some coprolites contain parts of diatoms, algae with intricate glass shells, which suggested that the giant squids that pooped them out lived near the surface of the water. Others had fish bones, scales, and otoliths, which are small calcium carbonate structures used for hearing. That meant that giant squids weren't just eating algae. They were actively hunting prey. Otoliths are tough, though, so Weckler didn't think that the squids could just swallow them whole. Instead, he proposed that giant squids use their beaks to eat fish like today's Humboldt squid. This is also supported by scars left on the otolith, suggesting that the squids were ripping their food apart before swallowing it. In another study published in 2021, geologist Dana Yerger took a slightly different approach. She looked at stomach stones, also called gizzards, which are ingested rocks that sit in the stomachs of some animals and help grind up their food. These gizzards aren't produced by squids, but by their prey. So by studying the composition of the rocks, scientists can get a sense of where the squids were getting their food. Yerger studied a collection of gizzards that had been gathered from Humboldt squid off the coast of Chile. She found that the rocks closely resembled those found further south near the Antarctic convergence, a boundary between cold and warm waters. And she noticed something else. The gizzards were mostly quartz, which can only be found on land. There are a couple possible explanations for this. Maybe the rocks fell into the ocean after being eroded off distant mountains. Or maybe, as Yerger believes, the Humboldt squid are traveling far south to feed. This would explain why fishermen sometimes find Humboldt squid hundreds of miles away from their usual habitat. And if the giant squid were doing the same thing, it would suggest that they too were active predators rather than passive filter feeders. So while coprolites and gizzards might not be as exciting as actual fossils, they've taught us a lot about how giant squid lived. They were large marine predators that hunted fish. But despite their size, they lived relatively recently in Earth's history. So where are they now? According to researchers, they vanished around 17 million years ago. And one team may have just cracked the case on what happened. Researchers from the University of Gothenburg in Sweden wanted to find out whether a changing climate played a role in the extinction of ancient giant squid. To do this, they looked at sediment deposits from the bottom of the ocean, specifically at the ratios of different forms of oxygen. On land, most of the oxygen we use is the same stuff found in the atmosphere. By measuring the ratio of O18 to O2 in sediment, researchers can reconstruct how warm the water was when the sediment first formed. So, I ratio indicates warmer temperatures. Paleoclimatologist Malene Ronskuld and her colleagues were able to measure oxygen ratios in sediment layers dating back 25 million years. Then they compared that data to a model of how ancient giant squid would have survived in the environment. They found that the squid needed surface waters of about 13 degrees Celsius, which is about 55 degrees Fahrenheit. But as the world began to warm after the asteroid that killed off the dinosaurs, the surface waters became too warm for them. By 17 million years ago, the average temperature had risen to about 16 degrees Celsius, or 61 degrees Fahrenheit. And the giant squid disappeared. It may seem unfortunate that these enormous creatures are gone, but without their giant squid-proof fishing boats, we'd probably be in big trouble. No, seriously. Fishermen have learned to adapt to giant squid attacks. But in 1925, a massive squid was caught off the coast of Newfoundland, Canada. Its tentacles reached all the way up onto the deck of the fishing boat, and the crew had to fight it off with axes. Stories like these inspired author and natural historian Richard Ellis to write The Search for the Giant Squid, which was published in 1986. In the book, Ellis details many accounts of monstrous sea creatures, but he also discusses theories as to why giant squids might still be out there hiding. One idea is that they simply prefer deeper waters, which means that although they're probably still swimming around, we just haven't seen them yet. Another theory suggests that giant squid don't exist anymore, at least not in the traditional sense. Ellis writes that bioluminescent fish remains have been found inside Humboldt squid, suggesting that they may have developed the ability to produce their own light. If that's true, it could mean that giant squid evolved into an entirely new species, one that's better suited for surviving in the dark depths of the ocean. So maybe the story of the giant squid isn't over yet? Perhaps they've just learned to hide. Thanks for watching this episode of SciShow. If you'd like to learn more about giant squid, check out our previous episodes, What Do Giant Squid Eat? Or watch this video about mysterious ancient shipwrecks.